We'll be starting in just about 30 seconds. Oh, okay. Okay.
And we do expect you to be coming in and out.
Sure. Well, you just give me the high sign when you want me to go. Sorry? Oh, once or twice, not here. Introduce myself to you. Good morning to all of you. I am Adrienne Alpert, and I've been a reporter at ABC 7 since 1996. I don't know why I'm introducing myself. I think I've interviewed most of you in this room. I think once I just keep talking, they'll hear me. I'm pretty loud. I don't even need a microphone sometimes. I'm going to be moderator for the opening and closing sessions during today's conference. Luskin Summit 2019 is a research-informed, cross-sector conversation about the major issues facing our region. The theme is Livable LA. Joining us today as participants will be elected office holders and government officials, civic and business leaders, scholars, and friends from the philanthropic community. Now, this summit is a pretty natural fit for ABC 7 and me. I host the station's weekly public affairs program called Eyewitness Newsmakers. As I say, I think many of you have been on it. Several topics being discussed at this conference have been featured on my program in the recent years. And like this summit, the conference is dedicated to a deep exploration of local issues and concerns. Today's event is timed to commemorate the 25th anniversary of UCLA's decision to combine its public policy, urban planning, and social welfare programs into a United School of Public Affairs. Thank you for being part of the school's effort to foster positive, achievable change. In a few minutes, we'll have the opportunity to hear from Congresswoman Karen Bass, guest of Eyewitness Newsmakers, who will be delivering the keynote address for the conference and taking a few questions from the audience. And so I'll facilitate your questions after she's through speaking. So get your notes out and get ready to ask some questions. If you need to step out at any point, you can stay in touch with the events in this room by watching the live stream being broadcast on the UCLA Luskin website at luskin.ucla.edu. This conference is possible because of the generosity of several sponsoring organizations. The lead founding sponsor is Bank of America. And joining us today is Danielle Campos, Senior Vice President. She is the director of a Bank of America program that focuses on environmental, social, and governance leadership. She serves as National Philanthropy Director for the Bank of America Charitable Foundation and leads a team that delivers philanthropic programs focused on economic mobility for individuals and families. Since joining the bank in 1994, she's held a number of roles related to strategic planning and the bank's local philanthropic partnerships. Ms. Campos is a graduate of UCLA with a degree in sociology, and she is a past president of the UCLA Latino Alumni Association. Let's give her a warm welcome now.
Good morning, and thank you, Adrian, especially for referencing my graduation of 1994. Or was it 90?
I'm asking people not to do the math. Don't subtract.
Don't do the math. But really, on behalf of Bank of America, our over 6,000 employees here in LA, and my team, my colleagues here from the local market, we really are glad to be here this morning and welcome you and kick off the summit. When I met Dr. Segura on the UCLA team, it really inspired and it was reinvigorating to think about what's possible at this school and through this Luskin, through the Luskin School of Public Affairs. And because of that, I wanted to become really involved and engaged and have joined an advisory board with the Luskin School. So both as a Bruin and an Angelino, it's really important for me to be here and come back to the campus and be in front of all of you. And I want to thank Dr. Segura and his staff and faculty for convening us this morning to discuss, debate, and tackle some of the issues that are facing the city that we live and work in. As a large global company that is rooted in local communities, we realize that our capabilities are best at work when we empower individuals to make a difference and create meaningful impact in their own place of work and local community. Over the last few months, we actually launched a new campaign, internally we know as Power 2. And hopefully some of you have been seeing some ads. We created some new ads nationally, TV, print, but also as part of that outreach, we actually extended some local market outreach through our local markets across the country. And here in LA, we asked, what do you want the power to do? And we asked that across our employees, our customers, and different constituents we interact with. And again, a simple question, but we actually got some immediate responses here in LA. We received a range from those as specific goals about people's finances, to aspirations about ending homelessness, and to bringing social justice to underserved communities. Many of the topics that we addressed actually here today. Through my work, as Adrian mentioned, is on the philanthropy team, these are issues that we grapple with daily. And we want to do right by the communities we serve, but responsible growth we know is long-term. And we're not looking to be a Band-Aid, but rather find and ensure our whole company is part of a solution. And we understand that our success as a company must be shared, that the growth of our neighborhoods, our customers, and our company are interconnected, and one cannot succeed at the expense of others. So that's why we've been committed through our philanthropic efforts to the power of making a difference, helping individuals and families along the economic continuum, from addressing basic needs such as food and shelter, job skills training, which all create and contribute to the economic mobility for individuals and families, and to building thriving neighborhoods. I actually recently attended, I think some of you might have been at the Southern California Grantmakers conference a couple weeks ago, and a mentor and a fellow alum, Antonio Hernandez, who's the president of the California Community Foundation, said, California cannot consider itself a progressive state if the people we look to serve cannot even afford to live here. So I thought a compelling thought as we think about these complex issues like affordable housing. And we realize that this will require a cross-sector response of individuals, organizations, nonprofit, for-profit, foundations. And I know most of you are, I hope all of you are drawn to UCLA today to talk about those issues. And we all know they're critical to improving the quality of life in LA. So with that, again, welcome. Congratulations to Luskin on the 25th anniversary and to this inaugural event. We are proud to be working side by side with you, and we look forward to enabling more opportunities in the community. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Danielle. And our next introduction, a framework for discussions to follow today, will be provided by the annual Los Angeles County Quality of Life Index, overseen by Zev Yaroslavsky. Mr. Yaroslavsky is now the director of the Los Angeles Initiative at UCLA Luskin and the Department of History. Mr. Yaroslavsky is well known to anyone who has followed government in Los Angeles over the past 4 decades. He joined the UCLA faculty in 2016 after serving 5 terms on the Los Angeles County Board of Supervisors. He was first elected to the board in 1994. Previously, Mr. Yaroslavsky served almost 20 years on the Los Angeles City Council. He was first elected to office in 1975, stunning the political establishment by winning a seat on the City Council at the age of 26. At the time, he was the council's youngest member ever. As a councilman, Mr. Yaroslavsky was active in the areas of transportation, the environment, healthcare, and cultural affairs. Mr. Yaroslavsky first gained public notice as a UCLA student who had begun orchestrating high-profile protests in Los Angeles against oppressive treatment of Jews in the Soviet Union. As promised, Mr. Yaroslavsky is here today to tell us about the latest Quality of Life Index, a project of UCLA Luskin and the California Endowment. The QLI is an annual survey that asks Los Angeles County residents to rate their quality of life in 9 different categories and to answer specific standalone questions on important issues facing them and the Los Angeles region. Zev, I understand this is the 4th year for the QLI, so please tell us what residents told you about life in Los Angeles during this year's survey.
Thank you, Adrienne. Thank you. And thank you for what you've done to help inform the people of Southern California over all these decades. 4 decades, it's hard to imagine. First of all, a correction, I was not the youngest member ever. That would come as an insult to one of my predecessors, Roz Wyman, who is still going strong, who was elected in 1953 at the age of 22. And she's actually spoken to my class here at UCLA. First of all, thank you, Dean Segura, for inviting me to take a few minutes, and it's going to be just a few minutes, and it's a teaser. This is not the entire survey, and there's a lot that we just can't talk about in the time allotted to us, but I'm honored to be here and to help kick off this summit. The Los Angeles County Quality of Life Initiative, or Index, I'm sorry, is a project of the Los Angeles Initiative of the UCLA Luskin School and was prepared in partnership with the public opinion research firm of Fairbank, Maslin, Mullen, Metz, and Associates, with major funding provided by Rini and Meyer Luskin and the California Endowment. Now, I want to just say one word about Rini and Meyer Luskin. This index came about one night at the Hollywood Bowl about 4 years ago when we were having dinner, and I just come to UCLA, and Meyer said, what are you going to be doing there? And I told him about our survey, and it was just going to be a public opinion survey. And he said, why don't you do an index so you can compare it from year to year? I said, that's a brilliant idea. And then the concert started, Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto. And then at intermission, Meyer says to me, he says, all through that concerto, I could only think about this index. And I said, you know something? That's all I thought about. It was really a brilliant idea, and you'll see some of the comparisons here this morning. And I thank you, both you and Rini Meyer, for not just for your financial support, but more importantly, your intellectual support, your ideas, which have been flowing ever since. I'm not conversant in PowerPoints, so I'm going to, there we go, there. I want to also just acknowledge the presence of Paul Maslin and Adam Sonnenschein from our research firm who are here, and my partner here at UCLA, Elisa Belenkoff-Katz, who for 40 years worked with me at City Hall in the Hall of Administration and was my chief of staff for 25 years. And now keeps me out of trouble here and does a lot of the heavy lifting. Thank you, all of you. The 2019 QLI survey was conducted between February 28th and March 17th. 1,406 survey interviews were randomly conducted throughout Los Angeles County with a margin of error of plus or minus 2.6%. 65% of the interviews were conducted by phone and 35% were conducted online. Interviews were conducted both in English and in Spanish. Slide 2, there we go. This is the 4th annual survey asking residents to rate their satisfaction with their lives in LA County on a scale of 10 to 100. Respondents are asked to rate their satisfaction in 9 categories and 40 subcategories. Residents also rank the relative importance of those categories. So not every category is as important as another one to our respondents. We ask them to tell us what's most important to you. The satisfaction and importance rankings are combined to create an overall index score. The survey also asks a series of standalone questions on issues of importance to the respondents and to the Los Angeles region. So here's the 2019 LA County Quality of Life Index in brief. For the second consecutive year, our overall index score was 56, 1 point above the midpoint in our 10 to 100 scale. This is a drop of 3 points from the first 2 surveys that we did in 2016 and 2017. While the ratings in some categories marginally improved, one category score continued to decline. That category is the cost of living, particularly the cost of housing. This, without a doubt, is the story and the finding of the 2019 QLI. Cost of living has received the lowest satisfaction score in every survey we've conducted. And in 2019, it sunk to its lowest level yet, just 42 on a scale of 10 to 100, far below every other category. This has a huge impact on the final index score itself. If respondents' cost of living satisfaction score had been the same as the overall index score, that is 56, the overall QLI score would have been 60, not 56. Moreover, well, I don't know if I did this right. 70% of our sample chose, I think this is right, yeah. Moreover, 70% of our sample chose cost of living as the most salient category when matched up against every other category, every one of the other 8 categories. No other category even came close. This slide enables us to look at the relationship between salience and satisfaction. It may not look very sharp, and I don't have a pointer, but I'm going to call your attention to a couple of things. The cost of living is in a world of its own, as you can see in the upper left-hand part of that chart. It has the highest salience and the lowest satisfaction rating. Similarly, education has the 4th highest salience and the 2nd lowest satisfaction rating. On the other hand, healthcare, which may be a surprise to some, but not to us, has the 3rd highest salience and the highest satisfaction rating. It's been in the top tier ever since we started. For the first time in the survey's 4-year history, a majority of respondents, 53%, said that what they pay for housing, mortgages, or rents was the most important factor in their cost of living rating. Cost of living, particularly the cost of housing, is the single biggest drag on the rating that county residents ultimately give their quality of life in Los Angeles. Satisfaction with the cost of housing is much lower among renters and younger respondents, 36 and 37 respectively on a scale of 10 to 100. Even among homeowners and older residents, ratings fall well below the midpoint at 47 and 50 respectively. Finally, even across the income spectrum, no, I missed one here. Yeah, I'm sorry. Across the income spectrum, cost of housing is ranked well below the midpoint, 40, 42, and 44, working our way across the various income brackets, as you can see in the slide. We divided our respondents into 3 groups, one that consists of those who are most comfortable living in LA County, largely homeowners, college graduates, people over 50 years of age, and at least an upper middle income in our region. Another group that consists of those who are struggling, mainly renters, non-college educated, under age 50, and middle to lower income. They also happen to be disproportionately people of color in our region. That's 36% of our sample. And one group that falls in between those two, call them the middle group. On this slide, you can see how satisfaction scores vary based on who's comfortable and who's struggling. For example, the struggling and middle groups rated their satisfaction with the amount they pay for housing at 37 and 38, respectively, while the comfortable group rated it at 48. The comfortable group also rated interactions with local law enforcement and the availability of parks near their homes far higher than the other two groups. One last illustration of the impact that the housing issue is having on Los Angeles is on this slide. I can look at it here. We asked if respondents had considered moving because of housing costs. I think I'm off by yes, here we go. I'm sorry about this. This is what happens when you get a beginner. We asked if respondents have considered moving because of housing costs or whether they knew someone who has. That figure has risen significantly in the last 3 years, from 47% in 2017 to 57% in this year's survey. I didn't include a slide here, but I want to point out that for the third consecutive year, 25% of our respondents say they or someone they know has worried about losing their home and becoming homeless as a result. 1/4 of our county's population. The anxiety levels over housing security are much higher among younger respondents. This has been consistent since the beginning of the survey. 65% of residents between the ages of 18 and 49 have considered moving because of housing costs. 65%. 48% between the ages of 65 and 74, and only 33% of those 75 years of age and above. Turning to another topical subject, we asked respondents to weigh in on issues of growth and development. 62% of LA County residents say that new apartments should be built only in neighborhoods that are already designated for multifamily housing, while 29% say they should be allowed in any residential zone, including those currently zoned for single-family homes. That's a topical issue this very day up in Sacramento. On that question, there is significant difference between homeowners and renters. 72% of homeowners, not surprisingly, and 53% of renters say new apartment construction should be confined to multifamily zones, but still a majority in both groupings. We asked county residents to characterize the impact of growth and development in their communities. And as was the case in previous surveys, residents are still divided, almost evenly. 47% viewing development negatively and 44% viewing it positively. That gap has narrowed in the last 3 years during this survey. We asked several questions about traffic and transportation. Fully 88% of our respondents think that their household will own a car 5 years from now. This is an interesting question because there are proposals to eliminate parking in all new residential construction. So it begs the question, where do you put your car? Less than half of the respondents have used the bus or rail system in the last year. Only 21% used them in the last month, and 14% say they have never used it. However, about 40% of our respondents say they use shared on-demand, shared or on-demand transportation at least once a month. 37% say they've never used it. Not surprisingly, younger respondents rely far more heavily on these transportation methods than older ones. 25% of those between 18 years of age and 39 use them at least once a week, as opposed to 8% of those over 65. On the issue of congestion pricing strategies, 64% oppose and 30% support. Congestion pricing projects in other communities, however, have started off with similar negativity, but have been the projects have been won over once the public experienced it in operation. And if one believes that significant public support is a prerequisite for the implementation of what in Los Angeles could only be called revolutionary, policymakers should undertake an intensive outreach campaign, educational campaign that might help formulate a model that would gain political and public support for such a strategy. Excuse me, let me finish. Okay. Can you, all right, you weren't on my script, sir. So, thank you. Okay. So in this automobile-dependent region, this can only be called revolutionary. But one of my favorite axioms would apply here, which is, when starting a revolution, call it a pilot program. And that's exactly what Metro is looking at doing, is taking an area and piloting this and working out all the kinks and see if it can gain public support and if it actually is efficacious. This last slide, I would put in the category of worth watching. In each of our surveys, we have asked respondents to tell us what their annual household income is. Since our first survey in 2016, when the percentage of respondents reporting a household income of under $30,000 was 27%, that percentage has dropped significantly this year, registering at only 19%. In all but one of the other income brackets, the percentages have risen. This could be because incomes have risen modestly in the last 4 years due to a more robust economy and an increase in the minimum wage. Or it may be that the lowest income individuals have been forced out of the county due to the lack of affordable housing and other costs of living. Or, and most likely, it's a combination of the two. This is a trend worth monitoring as we go forward. There's a lot to be positive about in this year's Quality of Life Index. Los Angeles County residents have a high level of satisfaction with health care, a rating of 69. Relations between people of different races and ethnicities and religions, a rating of 68. And the quality of life in their neighborhoods, also a rating of 68. On the other hand, resident satisfaction on the subject of public safety has declined in the last 4 years from 64 to 60. And on the environment, from 61 to 56. It's a significant drop. And this was principally driven by rising concern over climate change. Our objective when we commenced this project in 2016 was to help inform policymakers, opinion leaders, and researchers as to how county residents are impacted by the stresses and strains of everyday life in our region. Our goal was to measure resident satisfaction, to consider what matters most to them, and to focus constructive attention to those very matters. But the unmistakable takeaway from this project continues to be the crippling impact of the cost of living in Los Angeles County, punctuated by the extraordinary cost of housing. There's much more to our 2019 QLI than what I could share here in the time we have. I hope, however, that this glimpse will help inform and animate some of the discussions today and beyond. For those who want to do a deep dive into this survey, the full complement of this research is available, I believe, as of this morning, on the UCLA Luskin website, as are each of our previous studies, so you can actually compare from year to year. Again, I want to thank Rini and Meyer Luskin, the California Endowment, our other funding partners, and especially Dean Gary Segura for their continued confidence in and support for our work. Thank you very much.
So now I'll say publicly I've got Zev cornered. He's going to be on Newsmakers upcoming, so we can talk about this more deeply. So hopefully you'll watch that and hear more. Now I introduce Gary M. Segura, Professor and Dean of the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs, a position he's held since 2017. His work focuses on issues of political representation and social cleavages, the domestic politics of wartime public opinion, and the politics of America's growing Latino community. Prior to coming to Los Angeles, Dean Segura has been on the faculty at Stanford University since 2008. His previous faculty appointments were at the University of Washington, the University of Iowa, Claremont Graduate University, and UC Davis. Dr. Segura has published more than 55 articles and chapters and is a co-author of 4 books. He has briefed members of Congress and other public officials on issues related to Latinos. He served as an expert witness in 3 marriage equality cases heard by the Supreme Court. And he has filed legal briefs on subjects as diverse as voting rights, marriage equality, and affirmative action. And please welcome now Dean Segura.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is my honor to welcome you to the University of California, Los Angeles, by consensus, the nation's finest institution of higher education. The groaning you hear from Berkeley, just ignore. It's also my privilege to welcome you to what we hope will be a memorable event, and which I'm certain it will be. First of all, a thank you to the committee of the Luskin Board of Advisors who sparked the idea and got the ball rolling. Thank you specifically to the summit sponsors, the Bank of America, the Los Angeles Rams, our media partners at ABC7, and the Southern California Leadership Network, Guidehouse, and the California Endowment. We deeply appreciate your support. I also want to take a moment, as always, to thank Meyer and Rini Luskin for their numerous contributions to UCLA and for their generous support of our mission. Indeed, I speak to you today as the Luskin Endowed Dean of the Luskin School holding an event at the Luskin Conference Center. So thank you to Meyer and Rini, and I should also say that in addition to their very generous support, they've also been deeply helpful in my role as dean, and I appreciate both their advice and insight, and we would not be where we are today without them. At UCLA, we try to educate future leaders and change makers in the interest of improving our society with the tools and inspiration that we can provide them. We like to say that at Luskin, we put the public back in public higher education. This summit is a reminder that we do not pursue our mission alone, but in fact, our hope is to serve the leadership of the society in creating positive change for individuals, for families, for communities, and for the nation. Today, you'll hear from a series of dedicated public officials who understand that as great as our nation is, it can be better. And they are taking action to make our country, our city, and our region more effective, more innovative, more fair, and more inclusive. One of those people is Congresswoman Karen Bass. Representative Bass was elected to her 5th term in Congress last November, and in the nation's capital, she advances the Los Angeles perspective on such vital issues as housing equality and access to public transportation. She is a strong supporter of gun control. The Congresswoman serves on the Committee of Foreign Affairs, and she chairs the Congressional Black Caucus. Prior to being elected to Congress for the first time in 2011, Congresswoman Bass served the California State Assembly from 2004 to 10, and she was Speaker of that body from 2008 to 2010 in a historic role. Her record of advocacy for fairness and for opportunity on behalf of Americans from all walks of life and from all economic circumstances is a model of constituency service and fierce representation. I should say that this is not the first time Congresswoman Bass has engaged the Luskin School. In 2014, she was our commencement speaker, and even prior to that, she served as a Luskin Senior Fellow, mentoring students and helping to match them with opportunities in the job market. So Representative Bass, if I can say thank you for helping 3 of our former students obtain careers in public affairs. So with that in mind, as Dean, it is my honor to welcome you back to the UCLA Luskin School of Public Affairs Thank you for being with us this morning to launch the summit by delivering what I know will be an inspirational keynote address. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the gentle lady from California, Congresswoman Karen Bass.
Good morning, everyone. It is my pleasure to be here. It's always wonderful to be out of D.C. You know that we are on a 2-week break, and people do think when we're on these breaks that we take vacations, but actually it means that we're in our districts working, and so I'm very happy to be here with you. I want to thank the Dean for that kind introduction, and also acknowledge a dear friend and mentor, former Supervisor Yaroslavsky, and the Luskin family, who I have had the honor of meeting on several occasions. So thank you again for your contributions. And I also want to acknowledge two of my colleagues and friends, Wendy Gruhl, Richard Katz, former elected officials that are here, and all of the leadership that is in this room. So I wanted to do a couple of things. I wanted to talk about what we're doing in D.C., because if you watch TV, you have no idea what we're doing in D.C. I thought I would tell you something that might be hard to believe. Democrats and Republicans actually do work together. We don't hate each other. Our accomplishments, unfortunately, don't sustain media attention. So you might hear that we passed legislation on gun control, and you hear about it for one day, and then somebody tweets, and then that's all you hear about for the next several hours. So I'll get back to talking about that in a minute, but I did want to just highlight what is going on now. Again, you know, I'm old enough to have remembered in our country when we actually had news. Now we have opinion, so you turn on one station and you know what Democrats think, you turn on another station and you know what Republicans think, but it's hard to actually see what is going on. And actually, as I'm speaking now, the committee that I serve on, Judiciary, I serve on two committees, Judiciary and Foreign Affairs. The Judiciary Committee members are on a conference call right now talking about what it is that we're going to do. So just a little bit of background, because it is so confusing. So you know the Mueller report was released, and you know that the Mueller investigation was going on for a couple of years. I think most of you are aware that Mueller's charge was very, very narrow. He was only supposed to look at Russia's involvement in our election and not all of the other issues. You know that the reason why Mueller was doing what he was doing was because the president fired Comey, and he fired Comey a few months into his administration. What you hear, though, from the administration is that Congress has been investigating the administration for the last 2 years, which is actually not the case. Congress has been investigating the administration for 3 months. It was Mueller that has been doing the investigation. What is true, though, is that Democrats have been complaining for 2 years, but not having the power because we were not in control of the House. So with the Republicans in charge over the last couple of years, there basically was no investigation and no oversight. Mueller's charge, as I said, was very narrow, but in the course of his investigation, he discovered a whole lot of other things, and he triaged cases out. So there's more than 14 cases that are being investigated by other branches of the Department of Justice, most notably New York. So when the Democrats took control of the House in November, everything changed. And I think a lot of us don't realize what it means when the House changes power. I know Richard Katz knows, because Richard Katz was in Sacramento when the House changed, if I'm not mistaken. And that is a huge undertaking. So for the last 8 years, when I got to Congress, when Republicans took over, in November, when it changed back to Democrats, then everything in the House of Representatives had to change. And so now that the Democrats are in control, the Democrats chair the committees that will be involved in the investigation. So one thing that is a responsibility by the Constitution for Congress, we are supposed to provide oversight and investigation of the administration. you know, this goes on all the time, but most of the time it's not that controversial, so you don't really hear about it. But it's kind of made to be super controversial now because we're in a hyper-partisan situation. So the president, with all of his brilliance, and he is brilliant in some ways, he has coined our constitutional responsibility as harassment. So it's called presidential harassment, even though if you look at the Constitution, that is exactly what we are supposed to be doing, which is oversight and investigation. That is not harassment. So just as he drilled the word collusion in our minds, and people thought that the only thing that Mueller was doing was investigating collusion. You know that collusion isn't even a crime. If you read the first page of the Mueller report in the executive summary, he says he was not looking at collusion. He was looking at conspiracy. And he said that there was lots of evidence there, but not evidence that was definitive to say that they were actually conspiring. It kind of looked like it, it acted like it, but he couldn't document a phone call or an email that said they were actually making a deal with each other. But it was also acknowledged in his report that there was a lot that was destroyed, so from text messages to emails and all, so it's not really clear. One of the things that I think we are all experiencing in our country for the first time is that we actually have an administration that has its own TV network. And we've never really had that before. So we're all amazed that the president's poll numbers within his base stay the same, and we can't figure out why that's the case. But I don't know how many of you watch Fox, but it's important to do sometimes, because sometimes we tend to watch, and I think that we've done this more and more in our country, we listen and watch to the people that we agree with and don't necessarily turn and see what the other side is doing. But if you watch Fox, you are watching a completely different reality, and in that case, it makes it very difficult then if the people that are watching that station would have no motivation to pick up and actually look at the report and see what the report says. So moving forward, what's going to happen? So two things are happening. One, there are 4 committees that are actually going to follow up on the Mueller report. The Judiciary Committee, when I go back next week, Attorney General Barr, we will have a hearing with him. He will be there. I think it's Wednesday we have a hearing. I'm sure that hearing will last all day. Mueller is supposed to testify at the end of May, and we also yesterday subpoenaed McCann. McCann is was the president's attorney. That part, we're looking at obstruction of justice. The Government Reform and Oversight Committee will be looking at the Mueller report. The Intelligence Committee will be looking at the Mueller report, and some of what the Intelligence Committee finds out, some of their hearings will be in public, some of them won't. The Foreign Affairs Committee, which is also the committee I serve on, will be looking at the Mueller report as well in terms of the Russia connection. But then the second part of it is the other committees are going to be looking at the issues that Mueller triaged to New York and to the other parts of the Department of Justice. So issues such as past financial crimes, corruption, Trump's businesses, the conflict of interest, the emoluments clause. You know about the hotel that's right down the street from the White House. You know about the foreign governments that make sure they stay there before they go and have meetings. You know about the fact that pretty much every day that he's been in the White House, he's made money. So every time he goes and golfs on the weekend, he makes a lot of money because all the Secret Service has to come. They stay in the hotels. So he's making tons of money throughout his presidency. So those issues will also be investigated. Trump's taxes, trying to see exactly where his money comes from, how wealthy is he? Is he a billionaire? I've always believed that one of the reasons he doesn't want us to see his taxes is because he's not as rich as he says he is. And that's very traumatic to him for anybody to know that. So 2 committees will be looking at those issues. The Financial Services Committee, which is chaired by our very own Congresswoman Maxine Waters. She's issued a subpoena for the Deutsche Bank, which we know that a lot of money laundering, a lot of Russian money has gone through the Deutsche Bank. And then the Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that has subpoenaed the taxes. So it's a big challenge for the president because in his early 70s, for the first time in his life, he takes a job where he has to be accountable, because he's never had to be accountable at any point in his life. So now we're getting ready to enter into the twilight zone because he has pretty much said he's not going to cooperate with anything which is going to throw us into a constitutional crisis. What happens when we issue subpoenas and he says, I'm not going to follow them? What happens when we go to court and then the court orders him to comply and he says, make me? And so this is going to be a real big challenge. He's even said today that he's not going to allow McCann to speak. Well, remember, McCann is not in the administration anymore. And so that's going to be very interesting. So impeachment, in my opinion, impeachment will not happen. And I don't think it will happen, and I know people in this room are aware that impeachment is a two-step process. So we could impeach him tomorrow. I think people want him impeached because they would like to see him removed. If we impeach him, he will not be removed because it will not be taken up in the Senate. And so to me, what is the point of that? But that's just my personal opinion. That's being debated right now on the phone call because a lot of my colleagues are conflicted and feel like there's all the information there and we need to move forward. But the part of the Mueller report that was frustrating, though, is the fact that he walks us right up to it. He says there's 10 examples of obstruction of justice, but you know what? I'm going to send the baton to you. You guys figure it out. If he had indicated that he felt that he should be indicted, except for the fact that he's a sitting president, it would have made it a little less partisan. So the fact that he sends the baton to us, then anything we do comes across as looking partisan. I think Speaker Pelosi believes that the best way to deal with impeachment is to deal with it in 18 months, which is in November when we have an election, and to stay focused on that. So before I wrap up, I did say that we actually worked together on some things, so let me talk about that quickly because I'm paying attention to that timer right there. So when it comes to foreign policy, those are areas where Democrats and Republicans the majority of time actually agree with each other. I've served on the Foreign Affairs Committee for years. We typically don't even vote in that committee because everything is done by consensus. Small business is another area where we work together. Criminal justice reform. There was an opening there. We passed a bill related to prison reform. The administration is very interested in that. Jared Kushner is very interested in that. We know he is because of what his father went through, and maybe he's worried about his future. But criminal justice reform is an issue that's very significant to me, and I plan to focus on it. I know the administration is interested in moving forward with criminal justice reform, focusing on reentry issues, and so we will work together on that. Intellectual property. I serve on the subcommittee on intellectual property. That's a really critical issue in this area, in our area, because of the entertainment industry. So copyright, patent, privacy, those are issues that are very bipartisan issues. Issues related to children are bipartisan. Even parts of immigration is bipartisan. If you remember, the Senate did pass a bill on immigration. It was not taken up by the House, but maybe there is something that we can do on immigration moving forward. I don't believe it will be comprehensive immigration reform, but we at least have to figure out what to do with these children. We don't know how many children were taken, we don't know where they are, and the federal government right now has no responsibility to reunite these children. It is not their responsibility, and so we're going to work on legislation that requires the federal government to be responsible and to pay damages because they have damaged all of these children that they have taken away. Right here at UCLA, you know, there's a student that was born in southern Africa, but her parents were Liberian. She was afraid that she was not going to be able to graduate because her temporary protected status went out at the end of March. And so she was afraid that she wasn't going to make it to her graduation. Fortunately, at the last minute, the administration gave her another year. But that's a student right here on your campus. She came and gave testimony about immigration. Transportation and infrastructure is going to be a big test in this Congress. And I believe that we'll be able to get a bill on transportation. And I know people say, well, you guys are never going to get anything done because of the Senate. But what you have to remember is that 22 senators senators are up for re-election next year, and they have to run on something other than that they support the president. And so to me, you take those openings and you run through the door, and transportation will be one of the issues that we run through the door on. Voting Rights Act, we have to pass the Voting Rights Act. When the Supreme Court gutted it, they turfed it to Congress for us to address, and so we're working on that right now. In terms of the House Transportation Bill, a few principles that Democrats are going to follow up on. The Highway Trust Fund runs out of money in September of 2020, so that means our taxes, if we raise the gas tax, will go higher. Now, you know, in California, we've been raising taxes on ourselves because we knew Washington wasn't going to do anything, so we might have to pay a couple of more pennies, but I think it will be well worth it. Supporting good jobs as a part of a transportation bill, especially focusing on things like local hire, and then looking at infrastructure broader than just roads, looking at water, for example, because after the Flint crisis happened, we realized that the water infrastructure in the country was broken nationwide. So let me just wrap up and say that, you know, all of the moaning and groaning that we've done over the last couple of years, because we've all been traumatized on a daily basis, you know, I mean, we really have. You sit here and worry about what he's tweeting. But you know what, though? One thing I have to hand it to him for is that I think he has been a catalyst for a level of involvement that I haven't seen in decades. And you know, to me, I think that's a real opportunity that we are being presented that we have to take advantage of, and we have taken advantage of it, which is why we won the House back last year. But I am hoping that this trauma that we have collectively gone through will lead to a change in our American culture. Because as a culture, we tend to not be involved politically. We're experts, we know what's happening with all the sports teams, we can tell you the personal business of all of the celebrities, and I have town halls, and I spend a third of those town halls explaining that I'm not in city council. And so, and it's not because we didn't learn it in high school. No one here remembers what they learned in high school. It's because it's a part of our culture to say that civic involvement means I vote, and then I go home. But you know what? We all fell asleep during the Obama administration because some of us thought we had elected a messiah. And so we elected him, and we expected him to change the world, and we had no further responsibility. So I am hoping that the lesson from this trauma that we have been through for 2 years is that we have to vote, first of all, and vote consistently, not just vote when there's a president on the ballot, but that more than voting, we have to be involved and stay involved. Because if we're asleep at the switch, this is what you wind up with. So in spite of all of the trauma, I have been very excited about the level of involvement, and it's not just that people are involved, but people have an understanding of issues across category. So people understand immigration now in ways where they never even thought about it before. The Muslim ban, the environment, all of kind of the negative things that this administration has done, I think has sparked a new level of awareness and involvement where we are working across our silos, and I think ultimately we can take advantage of this period and bring about transformative change. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you today. And I just really want to acknowledge and thank the Luskin School for all that you have done for so many people in our community. Thank you very much.
So we have about 10, 15 minutes for questions for the Congresswoman. She opened up a lot of avenues. If you just raise your hand. Go ahead, a lady in the back of the room here. There are microphones on either end of the room.
Thank you for your presentation, and I appreciate your good work. I'm Phyllis Chestang. I'm finishing my PhD, and I have a question about the direction to take as far as senior citizens seeking affordable housing, as well as civil rights related issues. Transitioning from homelessness to temporary housing, I'll make it personal. I've experienced some vicious, racist attacks on a nightly basis. So I've contacted nonprofits, and I'm also seeking some leadership guidance on how best to address it rather than being forced back out onto the streets. I turned 66. I've worked honestly for over 52 years and applied for Social Security and was told to wait. It's been 4 months. So 2 issues, housing, civil rights, and the Social Security improvements that I suggest should be made.
So, and specifically, if you wanted me to follow up and address your situation, I do have staff here that can take your information and we can follow up. I didn't, I meant to mention that the housing issue, especially homelessness, one of the things that's been interesting to me working on a national level is that, you know, homelessness like we experience here is not a national problem. I mean, there are certain cities that experience this, but there's a whole lot of the country that don't. So it makes it a big challenge legislatively. I will tell you that Congresswoman Waters, the issue of housing comes up in her committee, and she just finished introducing a major piece of legislation that has a lot to do also with preventing homelessness as well as addressing it. So I'll make sure if Dylan, if you wouldn't mind following up with her. Okay, thank you.
Congressman, I have a question for you. You didn't mention the fact that it looks like the U.S. Supreme Court's going to be ruling in June 5-4 on allowing
I don't want to accept
the
that
census
yet.
question
I don't want to accept
on the citizenship
I
question on
know.
the census.
Well, I'm really worried about it, and I don't want to accept just yet. That I know that that's what it looked like, and that's going to be devastating to California.
I was going to ask,
And,
we could lose a seat, correct? And
What'd you say?
We would lose a seat at least?
Well, who knows? I mean, it could be more than that. You know, our delegation is so big. When the, Speaker Pelosi, when we were doing her inauguration and the delegation got up, it was like half the room. I mean, you know, 53 people, 46 Democrats, 7 Republicans in the state of California. And so there are people that would like to see us lose seats, frankly, but I don't want to concede yet that the Supreme Court is going to rule that way.
Oh, all right then. Glad to hear. In this side of the room, go ahead.
Hi, thanks so much for being here. Regarding the Mueller report, and you mentioned that there was not enough evidence to prove conspiracy, or some of these emails might have been deleted or disappeared. So I'm confused because I thought that you really could never get rid of an email or a text message.
That's the same thing.
And all of this is on the public record, and we
Yes.
should have the technological capability to
Yes.
find those emails.
So I was telling you what he said, because I agree with you. When I read that, I was like, what? Because he basically lays out that the Russians, it's clear the Russians were interfering. Everybody knows that. It's also clear that his campaign was taking advantage of it, and they knew it. But basically, and this is, by the way, you don't even have to read the foreign, if just read the executive summary of Volume 1 and Volume 2 of the report. It's all laid out there. So he said that he could not definitively say that they were coordinating, but it looked like he walked you right up there. That's why I said it would have been so much nicer if he would have been more definitive with us. Throwing it to us then is throwing it to the Democrats, and it just makes it look partisan. But I have the same question you do, and I'm going to raise it in the hearings coming up.
Thank you.
Especially when he comes before us.
All right, on the other side of the room, the gentleman on the right, or your left.
Good morning, Congresswoman Bass. Thank you. My name is Michael Rodriguez. I'm a professor in the School of Medicine and in the School of Public Health. And it is a great honor to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your work. I know that you are a champion for those people who have less than we do, and and all your career you have been working on issues of health and many other issues. As was raised, the issues about cost of living and whatnot, they are not only a cost of living issue, but they are also health issues. And as you know, so we are moving here in California to sort of address having health accessible to all. And many other states are doing that as well. I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about your vision for how we can move forward, not only with access to health care, but also with helping to ensure that when we pass policies, we start to think about the health of the populations that may be impacted, so we affect those determinants of health as well.
Yeah, and you would be surprised how few people in Congress have backgrounds in health, actually. Within the Democrats, I think we have 2 doctors. But when the Republicans took over in 2010, which is when I joined Congress, they elected a whole slew of doctors. And their goal was to destroy the Affordable Care Act. I mean, that was their charge. That's why they ran for office. So unfortunately, we're on the defense when it comes to health care, trying to, one, restore the damage that has been done, and then prevent further damage. Because since the president was not successful in having it repealed, they've just been killing it by 1,000 cuts. And you know, just one example is cutting the money for advertising, so people don't know when they're supposed to sign up, not giving the money to states to reimburse for people with pre-existing conditions. I know, you know, most of you here travel and have lived in other states, but I tell you, every week that I come home, I mean, California is such a bubble, and we live in a bubble here. We just don't have to deal with so many of the issues that other states have to deal with. So affirmatively, what we're working on is lowering the cost of prescription drugs. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Thank you.
If we're waiting for another question to come up, we're hearing.
Amber
Some
alert?
kind of alarm? Or is that a timer? Amber alert? Oh, okay, sorry. Oh, I have my phone silenced, I guess. Well, I have another question. We're reading about news that the Social Security Administration will be at least severely impacted by 2035, and listening to citizen watchdog groups saying that it's Congress's fault for kicking this problem can down the road. And what can be done?
Well, so every couple of years they come out and say Social Security is going to run out. It's based on if we did absolutely nothing. And that's just not going to be the case. So where, you know, the word entitlement has become a negative word, so I'll use the word guarantee. That's the only, Social Security is the only guaranteed program where the Republicans don't want to dismantle it. They do argue about privatizing it, throwing it to the stock market. How would that have worked a few years ago? Anyway, talked about privatizing it, but Medicare they would like to change into a voucher system. So I believe that Social Security is going to be fine because we're not going to sit there and do nothing.
So you don't see reduction in payments?
I do not.
Retirement age and higher withholding out of payroll?
I do not. I don't see us doing, well, first of all, none of that would happen right now because Democrats are in control of the House. So the Senate could do what they want, but you know, you can't pass legislation unless it's through both houses. So I know nothing will happen negatively regarding Social Security over the next couple of years.
All right, Congresswoman. Anybody else at a microphone?
Yeah, me.
All right. I think
Yes.
that, and
Hi.
we have time for one last question if there is anyone.
I have.
A gentleman with a microphone right in front of him.
Hi.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I'm with RAC, W-R-A-C, which is 13 neighborhood and community councils on the west side.
Oh. Yes.
Spoken with us. There is a courthouse that has been vacant since 2011 that I've been advocating as a homeless permanent housing. Mm-hmm. The facility has been allowed by the state to be sold. I would like you to use your political influence to get that facility made available for homeless housing.
Thank you very much. Let me just say on that note that, you know, we passed the part of the solution here by passing the bonds. And unfortunately, the minute after the bonds was passed, a number of neighborhoods said they'd sue because they don't want the housing in their area. And if that happens, then that means that the housing will be all pushed to South LA. My district, by the way, covers part of this area. I don't represent UCLA, but I represent part of Westwood. I go all the way to the west side. So what we've been doing is that we've created a congressional council, and we have representatives from each neighborhood in the congressional council. And they have decided that this year they want to work on homelessness. So we've been taking them through an educational process. Actually, folks from UCLA came and did a presentation. We took them to City Hall. Now next we're going to do a tour of Skid Row because we want to educate people, especially on the west side, about what it would mean to have housing for homeless folks in the area. It's not going to be a disaster. It's not going to create all these problems. People don't want to see the folks sleeping under the freeway, so they have to go somewhere. And so I appreciate what you said. We will follow up on it, but the reason we're taking the residents through this educational process is so they'll go back and participate in their neighborhood councils and fight for the housing to be spread all around the city. We can't just concentrate it into one geographic area, which is kind of how Skid Row came about to begin with, because the services, were concentrated there. So I appreciate it. I know it's the last question. I know you have a long day ahead of you, and I wish you a good conference. Thank you very much.
Big thanks to Congresswoman Bass for getting this event off to such a great start. Now, here's some housekeeping. So this is what you want to listen to here. This is going to tell you what your next steps are. It's time to go to your breakout sessions. The top sticker on your name tag refers to the first session you've chosen to attend. The color signifies the session. Please stay in this room for a housing-oriented look at understanding rising LA inequality. That's the red sticker. Preparing to thrive in a hotter LA will be in the Laureate Room by the main entrance of the Conference Center. This is the yellow sticker. And the Criminal Justice Panel is upstairs in the Optimist Room. I don't think that's an editorial statement. This is the salmon pinkish sticker. Again, that's upstairs for the Criminal Justice Panel. You have 10 minutes to get to your session, and there are snacks available from any nutrition hub in any of the hallways. There are staff on hand who will be happy to help you locate your room and answer any questions. Information about the sessions and the locations also in your program and booklet shown in the monitors. I hope to see everyone back here at 11:45 for the closing session. I'll be speaking to the mayors of 4 different cities here in LA County. So see you back here then.